Boker Tov Yerushalayim. Good morning, Jerusalem. I'm really happy to be here with you this morning. And I want to read you a message I received approximately 2 months ago from a very special place. Good evening. We condemn the attack on the IDF patrol and send condolences to the victims' families. My heart goes out to you, and may God protect you. We are with you in the same trench. We have to take advantage of this historic political moment. May God bless you and your family and the people of Israel, yours in friendship and peace. This is an email I received from Saudi Arabia after the killing of 2 Israeli soldiers by Hezbollah in the Lebanon border. I was born in Portugal. I arrived to Israel when I was 16, alone. I came here and I announced my parents I wouldn't go back. And the truth is, I made a master's degree in Tel Aviv University, and I taught there. But it was quite boring, the academic life, so I decided to become a reporter. And I work in 5 languages with different media outlets from North America, South America, Europe, and also here in Israel. And I'm sure you're aware that Israel is the center of the media world. In a way, this is the place with the highest number of journalists per square meter. There is a neighborhood not far from here called Ramat Sharet. There are more foreign journalists there than in the whole African continent. And there is a media war going on, parallel to the political war, diplomatic war, to the military war. There is a very important media war. And in this media war, this is a lethal weapon, the smartphone. And also a TV camera can become a lethal weapon, exactly like an F-15 or a tank Merkava. And the question is, in the middle of all these wars and this complication that we have in this area, I always remember the words of Don Corleone. You remember him, the Godfather? He used to say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And I think I need a psychologist, because sometimes I ask myself, why do you need so many enemies? To meet people really all the time in the last 2 decades, that some of them maybe would like to see me dead. Me and my family and my friends. And the truth is, there is no country in this world so threatened like Israel. Just look to the borders. Look what's going on around Israel. Look at this map. This is really the labyrinth of the Middle East. And there is so much madness, so much hate. But there are also some opportunities in the middle of this madness. And this is what I want to tell you. I meet lots of people from Hamas, from Al-Qaeda, from Islamic Jihad that would like to see us all dead. But I meet also people in this Arab world, in the middle of this complicated map, that ask me, look, we have the same interests. We have the same concerns. There is a madness in this area with groups like Islamic, the state, Islamic State. At this moment, they are in Homs beheading statues from different civilizations. And they say, we are concerned with that. We are worried. We want to fight together. We want to create coalitions against those common threats to all of us. Besides this, there is another threat for some of these countries, which is the possibility of an Ayatollah regime with nuclear weapons. And, I remember in 91, Nabil Shat, you heard this name, I'm sure, one of the leaders of the PLO, I met him in Cairo. And it was an interview, but after the interview, there was a very nice conversation for quite a while, I think almost 2 hours, speaking about the future of the Middle East. When I got to Israel back, I remember my friends, my colleagues told me, are you crazy? You can get arrested. It's forbidden to speak with PLO people. And look now, 1 year afterwards, the Oslo agreements, and it became something normal to speak with PLO and with Palestinian leadership. But the truth is, I believe that if Israel wants to survive in the middle of this chaos, of this Islamic tsunami, the only way is having allies, is finding people that have the same concerns. Yesterday's enemy can become tomorrow's ally, and Israel has potential partners. One of the most influential princes in Saudi Arabia, his name is Turki El Faisal. He was the head of the intelligence service for 15 years in Saudi Arabia. I met him recently in New York, and we had a long conversation too about the future. And you know, one of the things he told me, Henrique explained to me something. After the 6 Days War, we went to Khartoum, the Arab League, and we approved the 3 no's: no to Israel, no to negotiation, no to any linkage to Israel, no acceptance of the Jewish state. And Israel used this fact for years and explained to the world that the Arab world is not willing to have any kind of contact with Israel, accepting a Jewish state in this area. But then, in 2002, he told me, Prince El Faisal, we went to the Arab League and we decided to propose to Israel a recognition of all the Arab world, by the way, all the Muslim world, 57 countries, in exchange for an agreement with Palestinians and the creation of a state, a Palestinian state, beside Israel. And we didn't get an answer. That happened in 2002. And we went, said the prince, again and again we approved the plan, we changed it because the area is changing, and nothing, no answer. So he told me, how come? And I explained to him, you know, in Israel, security is a priority. It's the only country in the world, really, that in the Second Intifada had 200 human bombs, suicide bombing in the cities of Israel. It's the only country being threatened by dozens of thousands of missiles in the north, in Hezbollah, having Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, as neighbors. So you must understand it's not easy. But then I told him, I believe this is the only option for the future, finding coalitions with the Arab pragmatic world. And then he asked me a personal question. He told me, he's an intelligence service guy, so he knows everything. He told me, how come a 16-year-old boy from Europe come to a country like Israel? And I told him, you know, in Europe at that time, I didn't feel I was an equal, really, as a Jew. And then, you know, there is my personal past. From my mother's side, they were expelled from Spain in the 15th century, the family, and they went to Morocco to wait to go back to Spain. From my father's side, they were burned alive in the same day in 1942 in a synagogue in Lutsk, today Ukraine. And I saw in his eyes a certain understanding that I think he couldn't get from the intelligence reports. You remember Daniel Pearl, I believe. Daniel Pearl, my colleague, our colleague, a journalist who went to Pakistan 3 months after 9/11. And I was interviewing Omar Osama bin Laden. He is the son of the terrorist #1 in history, Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda. He was supposed to become the successor of Osama bin Laden in the group. He was trained for that for 12 years, 13 years, until he left his father. And for 3 years, I tried to get him. We had a kind of a rendezvous in Paris to meet him. And finally, he called me. He said, the French don't give me a visa. They said, imagine if in the airport in Paris, somebody say, Monsieur bin Laden à l'information. So he didn't come. But finally, I went to see him in Doha, in Qatar. And it was amazing because I was trying to convince him to give me an interview. And the moment I was trying to convince him, I saw a mail. And, you know, we look at the mails to see what's that in the telephone. And I see, you got the Daniel Pearl Award in the States. And you remember that Daniel Pearl was killed by Al-Qaeda. And he told me, look, I was with my father. I left my father because one of his assistants told me something bad is going to happen. Many of us will be killed. Go to Jeddah, to Saudi Arabia, with your grandmother and wait, because I want you to survive. And he went, and the day, the 9/11, he was sleeping when his uncle screamed, look, your father destroyed our lives. And since then, he said, he wants to bring peace to the world. He wanted to speak in a UN forum that I moderated in Doha, in Qatar, but they didn't accept. It was too early to have a bin Laden speak against terror. And you may ask, is this guy crazy? Lots of journalists do what I do. And there are moments of fear, I must tell you. One of them, I remember, it was in Gaza when Clinton, the president of the United States, for the first time decided to visit Gaza. And I remember the day before I went to see the guy who would be really the one who would not be very happy with that fact. And it was the leader of Islamic Jihad, the Sheikh Abdallah Shami. And I remember him, he showed me his son, and the son is 15 years old, and he told me, I'm so ashamed, the Sheikh told me. And I had a son exactly this age, Yair. And I remember he told me about his son, you know, my son is not ready to become a shaheed, to become a martyr. And I'm so ashamed about that. And the kid couldn't look in our eyes. He was also ashamed. And then he said to me, you know, I want to see Clinton tomorrow here in Gaza, dead. And this soundbite was broadcast all over the world. And that same day, my producer in Gaza calls me, Allah, and tells me, you know what happened? Sheikh Shami and the whole leadership of the Islamic Jihad were arrested now by order of Arafat because the CIA said if they wouldn't, Clinton would cancel the visit. So the day after, I needed to go to Gaza to cover the visit. And it was quite, you know, I was just looking beside my back all the time. And suddenly somebody said to me in the street, this is the guy, this is the guy. So my friends in Gaza just took me, kidnapped me to the studio and to be safe at that moment. So it's clear, it happens. And then the Sheikh, when he left jail, he called me for a meeting, and I sent my friend, Allah. But then some months afterwards, I came and I met him, and we did a sulha. But you know, these things happen in this area. But sometimes coalitions arise in very unexpected places. And that's what happened to me with the Pope, Pope Francis. I think one of the most brilliant statesmen in the world today. I remember I found myself in Santa Marta, in his house, in his residence in the Vatican, with his best friend, Rabbi Abraham Skorka, a Jew. And he was telling me, our friendship is a model to the world. And that's what I wanted to tell you to your camera. And then he said, okay, now come, I want to give you a sandwich. So he took me to his place where they eat all together. And we had lunch. And then he said, I want to talk with you without cameras. And for 1 hour and a half, we stand, the three of us, the rabbi, the Pope, and me. And he said to me, tell me something. You understand about the Middle East. What can I do for Israel? What can I do for the Middle East? They said, Pope Francis, come. You should come, and that should be your first visit, your first official visit. And he said, are you going to help me? I said, I don't think you need my help, but if you want, I will. And I didn't know what would be my schedule afterwards. It was quite complicated to organize his visit and also to organize a praying for peace in the Vatican. What I can tell you, once he said to me, you know, Henrique, there are some priests who don't really like Jews. And I said, really? He said, and he said, no. And I told them a story here. They were meeting in a room. There was a painting on the wall of Jesus and Mary, and they were saying, that's the Pope said to them, you know, we think, those priests said, that the Jews always think they are the center of the world. They always take, they never give. And suddenly Jesus went out of the painting and said, Mom, let's go. They don't like us here either. At this moment, as we speak, the Pope, the Rabbi, and others are thinking about programs of education for peace because they understand that peace in the Middle East and in general is impossible if there is no education for peace. And the problem is that most of the generations in the Muslim world, I would say even in some parts of Israel, need to have these values, to learn about these values before a change is possible. And I believe we must open our eyes, we must raise our heads, we must not miss a single chance of dialogue with those who have the same concerns we have. Extremists will be there for generations. They will continue there, but there are also others concerned about this extremism, and they are potential partners for coalitions in the future. And somebody, a leadership must be brave enough to start this dialogue. It will take time, it will be full of frustration, but I believe it's possible. We brought from Spain my mother recently to be with us. She was 89, there was her anniversary, and I remember I thought about myself, I thought it was like a dream. What will happen when I'll be 89? And I understood that at that moment it will be 2048, 100 years of Israel. And my dream for Israel is that at that time Israel will have recognized boundaries, borders, we don't have now. We'll be a model to the world, and we'll have relative peace inside our borders and outside our borders. And it's not impossible. Ben-Gurion, who was for me one of the main leaders of Jewish history, said, "The impossible things, we do them immediately." And, sometimes it will take time, but we'll get there. Thank you very much.